So just before the video starts, I wanted to give a quick shout out to what is quite possibly the most apt sponsorship I've ever come across for Vivec. Oftentimes I'll decline, 99.9% of sponsorship deals I come across because I just don't think Raid Shadow Legends is very appropriate for the sort of content on this channel. But I know a lot of you like to fall asleep to these report videos, and that's why I thought these COZYSNUG sleep earbuds from LYTMI really are a match made in heaven for this channel and its viewers. If you're anything like me, you might struggle falling to sleep on your back with conventional earbuds in. I'd always wondered whether there were any designs that facilitated side sleeping without waking up with a perforated eardrum. Not only do these earbuds work wonders for side sleepers, they boast high quality audio, are super lightweight and soft with various different sizes of ear wings to pick and choose from, on top of having 21 hours of charge when using the charging case. So, now you can all quickly and smoothly fall asleep listening to me recount the usual litany of mind-bending, reality-shattering experiences that we all know and love. If you're interested, please check out the link in the description, and don't forget to use the discount code VIVEC for 10% off your order. Anyway, we'll crack on with the video now, but be sure to let me know what you thought of the earbuds if you do end up snatching yourself a pair, and thank you to LYTMI for reaching out, I really appreciate it. Trapped in my personal hell. An Amanita Muscaria trip report by Agent Gull, posted to EARBUDS.org September 20th, 2024. I remember how giddy I was when the box of dried amanitas had finally arrived in the post office. For some reason, I had a strong feeling that this mushroom would help me out with my problems at the time. Foolishly, I didn't even try microdosing or starting small beforehand, thinking that my experiences with acid and one experience with 9 grams of amanitas gave me full right to rush straight into an amanita trip at 20 grams. This mistake later proved to be nearly fatal. It's true what one person said: you must respect Amanita, or it will make you respect it. I had 60 grams of mushrooms. Immediately, I split them into 3 20-gram portions, planning on having 3 trips. The first 2 trips were nothing out of the ordinary. I was mostly in control of my body and thought process. I had slight dissociation and sedation, no visuals, and had a great time meditating. However, with my third trip, everything was different. Before describing it, I'd like to point out 2 more mistakes that I made. Number 1, seeing that Amanita had no tolerance build-up whatsoever, at least for me, I thought it was a good idea to trip throughout the week. So, I had my first trip on Tuesday, second one on Wednesday, and the hellish third one on Friday. Number 2, I was living with my parents at the time. Seeing that the first 2 trips were mostly controllable, I thought that nothing bad could happen. And I was sorely mistaken. At around 6 o'clock, I came home from the gym. Mum was taking a nap and Dad usually returned home from work late at night. So in my mind, it was the perfect time to eat my last portion of mushrooms. At 6:40, I started experiencing familiar feelings from the trips before: euphoria, slight disorientation, and sedation. However, this time, something was different. In addition to those effects, I began to experience extreme arousal. The feeling wasn't very enjoyable though. I was so aroused that it actually made me dizzy, and I decided to deal with it so that it doesn't ruin the trip. I found some porn and was utterly hypnotized by it. The computer screen was sucking me into it, almost to the point where I felt like I was inside the film. When I was done, I was surprised to find out that it took me only 20 minutes, because for me it felt at least like an hour. My hands started shaking and I tried to calm myself down. Thoughts like, "Oh, this was a mistake," started running through my head. 7 o'clock, right after the deed was done, it felt as though my room's floor is a giant magnet. I lay down, putting my head on my gym bag. I prepared a playlist with some Celtic folk music beforehand, but for some reason decided to put another song on repeat as I fell asleep on the floor. 7:46, after 46 minutes of dreamless sleep, I woke up, still on the floor. Dissociation was much stronger than in previous trips. When I stood up and tried to walk around my room, it was as though my every limb had a mind of its own. Each body part was moving independently, and with each second I lost control over my body more and more. I couldn't feel my toes, which made me panic. I started checking if my toes were still there every few seconds. Aside from bodily dissociation, I also experienced severe mental dissociation. Just like with my limbs, every thought in my head was in disarray, and they all suddenly became louder. Thoughts started to fight with each other, each one trying to outscream the others. For some reason, that didn't scare me. I felt like I was rapidly going insane though, and at the moment this thought made me laugh out loud. The song that was still playing on repeat now had an almost apocalyptic feel to it, like everything around was crumbling down and the world would soon perish into nothingness. This made me laugh even harder. 7:53, one of the thoughts had finally won over. It was now repeating over and over in my head. There's so much dirt inside you, there's so much dirt inside you. So with this in my mind, I went to the bathroom, but without any success. However, I remained there for a solid 10 minutes, just watching the toilet flush and the water run away. I felt my heart pound loudly, surely trying to break out and tear my chest apart. Adding to the "there's so much dirt inside you" thought loop, images started appearing in my imagination. I was looking at the world through the eyes of my other woman self, degraded, humiliated, sexually assaulted, and abused over and over. The scenes made me simultaneously feel disgust and this trippy, dizzy arousal that I experienced in the beginning. At around 8:05, I finally returned to my room. The world was spinning around me, making me feel nauseous. Everything around me looked like it was about to collapse, and the walls seemed to bend and stretch in such a strange way that it seemed like my surroundings could snap into pieces any time. I don't remember blacking out or falling asleep, but somewhere between 8:05 and 8:50, I was whisked out of my body. From that moment on, only an angry, berserk husk remained on Earth, while my mind and soul were trapped in my personal hell. First, I'll write about what happened down here on Earth, from the words of my mother. At around 8:50, she heard screaming from my room. A scream so angry and loud that our neighbours had probably heard it. She knocked on my door but heard no response. Then other sounds started to come out of my room. I was hissing, banging against walls and furniture, crying, grunting. Not being able to take it anymore, she broke into my room. Upon seeing me, she didn't know what to do. This wasn't her son, whoever that was. It was an angry, confused animal with a bruised lip and chin. She tried to calm me down and sat me against the wall, a task which proved quite difficult to accomplish given the fact I kept thrashing around. After countless attempts, she finally managed to lead me out into the living room, where she sat me on the couch. Mum tried giving me water, and apparently I was trying to drink it, but my teeth were closed shut. Water was spilling all over my t-shirt, but I still refused to open my mouth. At that point, I calmed down a little and stopped thrashing around, but this image was even more terrifying for her. I was sitting there, staring blankly into nothingness, my arms completely limp, drool dripping off my chin. She called Dad, telling him to come home as soon as possible, explaining the situation to him. Now, my dad knew that I had purchased Amanitas, so he immediately put two and two together, and soon came home. Not knowing what to do with me and seeing that my condition wasn't improving, they called an ambulance. Upon arriving, paramedics quickly roughly tackled me down, which immediately triggered a fighting response. I once again started thrashing, screaming, trying to hit them with my fists and legs. It took two paramedics and my father to hold me down, and they injected me with haloperidol, tying me down, driving me off to the ER. At 11:46, I was admitted to the hospital. According to the staff, I was screaming at the top of my lungs, trying to fight them the whole time. I finally fully returned to my body at around 1 AM, finding myself with an uncomfortable urethral catheter, my hands and legs also being tied to the hospital bed, as well as being extremely exhausted and unsure if the hospital was real or just another vision. Well, this was what happened on Earth according to people who witnessed it. But where was my mind? At first, after being torn from my body, I was dragged through a series of uncomfortable visions. Each one of my mistakes, regrets, fears, dirty fantasies, anxieties, they all rushed before my eyes at the speed of light. "This is it," a voice said. "You're not coming back." And then, hell broke loose. I always believed that even if there were heaven or hell after death, they would be personally tailored for each soul. And I ended up in mine. Countless floating demonic heads surrounded me, jeering at me, taunting me. I ran through them, hitting them with my fists, kicking and screaming, shouting, "Let me out! Let me out now!" I fought back with all my might, but it was futile. I was too weak. Whenever one of the heads managed to grab me in its jaws, I was shown a different story of a different person. I can't really remember them in details, but each one was a story of constant fear, despair, and ultimately, demise. At the end of each one, a voice said, "This is you. This is you." And I was immediately spat out, thrown back into the sea of demonic heads. After what seemed like an eternity of fighting, I started to see a gap between the heads. Gathering all of my strength, I rushed towards it, kicking and screaming, desperate to reach my only chance of freedom. The gap was getting closer and closer, and upon closer look I saw that it's actually a crack in materium. One chance, I thought, as I jumped into it. I could feel it close behind me. I found myself floating in a dark, cold void. Now you get to experience every horrible thing you did before your body gave up on itself, a man's voice told me, and I saw a silhouette of light in the distance. This phrase doesn't make any sense now, but back then it made me feel this deep, cold terror. I felt as though I was dead, never to come back, and this entity was judging me for all of my sins. Looking at the silhouette gave me feelings of deep, primordial fear, but I couldn't look away or do anything else. This was likely during the time when my body was sitting on a couch in the living room with a blank stare. Remember, you did that because you were a coward. The silhouette started getting closer. You were never worthy of living anyway. It got even closer. "Oh, do something." My mind screamed at itself, but I couldn't move. "Do something!" Standing right in front of me, the silhouette clicked its fingers. I was immediately transported into a tiny room with walls of rusty metal. Invisible force dragged me around, hitting my body against the walls, ceiling, floor, until I just gave up and lay limp. Hands, bruised, covered in warts, appeared out of thin air. They started to touch me and tug at my limbs. Then they started tearing. Each time they tore off my limbs, I screamed in pure agony. They sewn them back and then tore them off again, torturing me. "This will never end," I screamed. At that point, I believed that I was already dead, and was to remain in there forever. I was thrown from one room to another, and in each room I was tortured in a different way. They were no longer sewing my body parts back, but they were just disassembling my body until nothing remained of me but the eyes, floating in the void. And so I, consisting of nothing but my eyes, began floating in the void aimlessly, searching for something. In the distance, I saw yet another silhouette standing on its hands and knees. Immediately, I recognized it as my own body. I tried to float into it, but something stopped me. A giant blade appeared in the void and was shoved into its groin, which was most likely a catheter insertion in the hospital. I felt immediate pain and tried to scream, but I had no mouth. Resisting the force pushing me away from my body, I attempted to float into it. But each time, through more and more agonizing pain, I was getting closer, and once I reached its face, the blade entered through its forehead, severing it completely. I floated into the wound and found myself inside the silhouette. I couldn't move my hands and feet, likely due to being tied to the hospital bed by the staff. Gathering all of my strength, I opened my eyes and found myself in a hospital room. There was no one else here. It didn't actually feel real, and I was sure that this was just another layer of my personal hell. Adding up to it was the realization that I'm tied to the bed, so I was convinced that any moment entities would come back and start torturing me again. I turned my head, looked out the window, and saw that everything outside was on fire. I closed my eyes, subjecting myself to fate, and finally fell asleep. When I woke up again, 3 doctors were in the room. One of them gave me another injection and started asking questions. What substance did I take? What did I experience? My mind was still hazy, but surprisingly, I was able to say that I ate some fly agaric, at which he scoffed. I didn't tell him about my experience, simply answering that I didn't want to talk about it. For the next 24 hours, I was slowly and painfully returning back to reality. I was discharged a day later. I didn't fully recover until a week had passed. I'm not planning another trip on Amanitas anytime soon. I feel deep regret for putting my parents through that, and sometimes in my nightmares, I briefly return to this hell of mine. As I said in the beginning, don't be foolish. Respect Amanita, or it will make you respect it. A grisly, yet brilliantly cautionary tale of why not to mess around with one of the most insanely unpredictable substances, for me at least. I've never actually taken it, but from reading about Amanita, trip reports online, studying it, there's a great deal of unpredictability with higher dose experiences, very similar to salvia in a sense. And interestingly, they share a few similarities in terms of dissociation and delirium, mixed with the classic hallucinogenic effects, feelings of ego dissolution, being flung into dimensions beyond human understanding, places you'd only see in your dreams, yet experiencing as viscerally as you do this reality. Very spooky stuff when things go wrong with Amanita, much like how when they go wrong with salvia. There are certain distinctions I've noticed between Amanita and salvia, not saying these two substances are related chemically in any way, but we can see a lot of characteristics that are shared between the trip reports, at least from the reports I've covered and read. But one distinction I've noticed is that in the Amanitas, you still can sort of cling on to your ego. This guy didn't have a full ego dissolution. Obviously, his mind wasn't on Earth or in his body, but there was still a sense of him being like a self, I guess. At least that's what I interpreted from this experience. Whereas in salvia, high-dose experiences where someone becomes like a random object, all sense of self is gone and they just accept, or, well, sometimes they don't accept, because I think they're still tethered to like their ego or sense of self, and that can make the experience quite hellish, where it's like, oh my god, I know that I'm a human on Earth, but I'm also this calculator object experience as well. But then as they go deeper, or people have these different types of experiences with salvia, they can just completely nullify any idea of ever being a human, and they just literally are this calculator forever. But then when they come back, they get that PTSD feeling of, oh shit, I've literally just been a calculator for 500 years. And maybe that's possible with Amanita as well, where you just have pure ego dissolution and there's literally no semblance of ever having been a human ever, and you're just literally trapped in this realm. Although I guess that he did have a bit of that here, where he felt he was in this eternal hell. This was really one of the most nightmarish Amanita experiences I've ever read, by far, and it's very, very new. There's only it's only had 15 views on EARBUDS, definitely one of the best written reports, and my god, my heart goes out to this person. This happened in September of last year, so all my best wishes for this person in his recovery from what I imagine will be an immensely traumatic period of his life that will require so much intense and thorough integration to really move on from and come out of the other side, rise from the ashes and turn this into something positive at least. Because it definitely can be done, but it requires such a deep degree of consciousness and determination and drive that many people can, fall into suffering even deeper, whereas others can use the experience and carve out a purer life for themselves, and oftentimes can look back on these experiences as, it was literally hell, but it was the makings of me, in a sense. I can relate to that, I had some hellish experiences on psychedelics that I then turned around. Literally hellish, not even on psychedelics, but many hallucinogenics. I remember I've had some like hellish ketamine experiences that were hallucinatory, where I felt like I was just in literally a hell realm, and I was on the precipice of losing myself in this reality and being stuck in this hell realm forever. I remember I watched Shutter Island, and there's a scene with Jackie Earle Haley in that prison. I can't really remember much about the film, but there's this scene, and I was watching it on Cat a few years ago, and I got sucked into his character and in the jail cell, and there was just this feeling of just sickness and illness and disgust and just all the most negative, hellish emotions and experiences all coalesced into this putrid maelstrom of negativity and evil and the distinct lack of love. It was honestly hellish, literally. But I now reflect on that experience as me sort of leaning into my shadow side. Obviously didn't want that experience to come about in the time, it was all recreational, but it felt like in retrospect it was showing me something about myself that I was running away from, and I'd reflect on that experience with consciousness now as being something that needed to happen. And it just showed that, yeah, if you mess around with these substances, no matter what they are, amanitas and salvia, if you mess around with them, especially, they really are going to kick you in the arse and give you a karmic biting, like I guess it did to this person. Because, again, the brilliance of these reports, of sharing stuff like this one in particular, is that it's a perfect case study in why you should just not mess about or overestimate your abilities with psychedelics, thinking, oh yeah, I've literally said, thinking that my experiences with acid and one experience with 9 grams of amanitas gave me the full right to rush straight into an amanita trip. Also, if I sound a bit different, I've got a cold. All the elements are against me at the minute. I've got no Wi-Fi, I've got a cold, but I'm still trying to get these videos. Fucking hell, I went Australian there. Still trying to get these videos out for your psychedelic curiosity and to satiate your desires to understand consciousness in its grandiose complexity. So yeah, it just proves again that a lot of these nightmarish, hellish experiences, while some can just happen randomly, I guess, I mean, does anything really happen randomly? There's oftentimes so many different series of events that lead up to a positive, neutral or hellish experience, any range of experience happening. Oftentimes it's never just random, there's always a chain of events leading up to it. And thankfully here he managed to pin down that the series of events leading up to it was sort of his hubris that he had in regards to amanitas, and yeah, it just came back and fucked him up based upon him misusing the amanita. But it's really healthy that he was cognizant of that, because I think sometimes in reports people have these negative experiences and maybe they just write up the negative trip, and they don't, maybe at the time they don't actually understand that they were messing around with ridiculously high doses, having no experience with the substance at all. They go in with a certain mindset that tampers with the actual trip. There's so many different variables that are going to produce a demonic experience that really just taps into like your most primal fears of pain and suffering and all of the worst quote unquote aspects of reality and consciousness. It's heavy stuff, but it must be said that you've got to not black pill yourself on the psychedelic experience when you read about stuff like this or hear about it, because there's a very deep reason for these experiences coming to fruition for certain people, and it really is like the hardest, deepest, most intense lesson that you can learn about consciousness and yourself. Egos that don't understand what's going on, which I was, like a dense ego that thought it could do anything with psychedelics and could handle it all, they are just going to get taught a very hard lesson, a rude awakening, if you will. But it's still an awakening, no matter how rude it may be. It can be the makings of you, as I said before. You really do just have to knuckle down after stuff like this happens to you. I bet many of you watching or listening to this will have had hellish experiences of your own. If you have had these experiences, please share them in the comments, and if you say, if you're working through it right now, maybe ask for help, see if other people can help you who've had these hellish experiences, that have managed to work through it and carve out a purer, more positive life that's aligned with love and truth and God, if you will. But yeah, many of the deepest people will have had hellish experiences of suffering through psychedelics and just their own personal lives and the circumstances they find themselves in, but it doesn't mean that it's all hell. There's a path to heaven through the journey into hell. At least that's how I like to perceive it. There's so much hell around us all the time, yet it's not a lie to state that you can actually create a beautiful life for you on Earth despite the hellish conditions that surround you, even outside of your own house. I think there's sometimes like, right, I'm here in my house and I'm carving out this conscious life for myself. Obviously, I still suffer with like egoic backlash and all of these other negative shadow aspects of myself. But for the most part, I have to take my life in a meta sense of human existence and see that I'm actually super lucky and super blessed to have the life I do. It's filled with love in so many areas that sometimes I can be blinded to when things don't go my way or I'm impatient and etc. But I also just have to take a step back and be humble and look out my window and look into all these other houses around me and think like, what's actually going on in there? I bet there's a lot more hell going on in there. There's a lot more personal hell that people are navigating that I've managed to circumnavigate much earlier in my life due to just my own circumstances and life choices. So yeah, I think stuff like this, I know people always want the positive experiences, but I think this is super crucial to learn from, especially because I think Amanitas are becoming more popular again, I've noticed. And how many times have I said it? The ultimate broken record simulator. You come to Vivec's channel and he tells you not to do it too fast. They do. And he keeps telling you to start with low doses of psychedelics. But sometimes they don't listen, and this is what they do. They get sucked into psychedelic hell, and it's really quite disgusting, sir. I don't know how I did Donald Trump there, but it felt like the right thing to do. Yeah, so basically just don't mess about with psychedelics, just take it slow and have some consciousness and pay. I think a big one that it's teaching you when you rush into anything is have a little bit of patience. To take that song. Robbie Williams, Better Man, now in cinemas, bombing at the US box office. Wow, I think a cold sends me into autism mode. I bet lots of people unsubscribed after all that, but the real ones stuck about. So yeah, I think you need to teach yourself a bit of patience, but just within your own direct experience. Like try meditation. Meditation's great from instilling a bit of patience into your personal life, because you've got to be patient to reap the benefits, the rewards from meditation. It's not about a reward in a material like hedonic sense. It's about the reward of having a clearer, purer, more patient mind. I mean, we live in literally the ADHD world of the dopamine feedback loop. Like the amount of impatience there is with everybody. Everyone's addicted to the vapes and the phones and instant gratification, and how many people can sit down and read a book anymore? I mean, I can't talk. I probably can't either. It's probably hard for me. I'm definitely hooked on it. The only reason I can see it in other people is not because I've transcended it, it's because I see it in myself. Absolutely no level of judgment coming from me, because I just see myself in other people because it's a reflection of myself. So when I see someone falling into the dopamine feedback loop, it's not because I've transcended it and I'm so much better than them and I've realized the futility of it. It's no, because I'm literally working through it myself. How can I say to myself, oh, look at that person, he's doing all these impatient, ADHD riddled things that our culture is sort of imbued with the current zeitgeist, but they might be on their own individual path, be cognizant of that. And even if they're not, everyone's just on their own journey, their own path towards awakening, I guess. So yeah, I didn't do the Psychonaut wiki breakdown of Amanitas in this video because I was just too excited to break it down just on a base level. I know that people like me going over the Psychonaut wiki overview, but I'll save that for a positive Amanita experience, because we must also recognize that there's super positive experiences that you can have with Amanita feelings of love and interconnectedness with the universe, being blessed by these ephemeral entities or ethereal even. They might be ephemeral. Nice words, both nice words to roll off the tongue. They might be these entities that bless you with the love of God and imbue you with downloads into the Akashic records and all these positive, beautiful things that we know and love about the psychedelic experiences that are possible if the psychedelic is treated with respect. But then you get ones like these that then again, it also goes back to the Jacob's Ladder metaphor of, yes, this guy was literally interdimensionally tortured by entities beyond human comprehension and was knee-deep in hell. But sometimes, later on in life, for many people who keep pursuing awakening and truth and love and yada yada, they will look back on this experience and see the entities as actually angels trying to wake themselves up. There's that great quote from Jacob's Ladder. And this theme can also be seen in especially Silent Hill 2, which was super inspired by Jacob's Ladder. Lots of psychological horror revolves around... The real horror revolves around... Not the real horror, but like some of the best horror, or my favourite horror, psychological stuff, it involves facing the shadow and almost trying to attain enlightenment in a sense and coming around from it. Sometimes they succeed, sometimes they don't succeed, but a lot of the best horror, like Silent Hill 2 and Jacob's Ladder, has this sort of element of enlightenment to it, and seeing the demons, which are very much demons, look like demons, devils, all the most freaky creatures and nightmarish eldritch beings that you can imagine. But they have this aura behind their demonic appearance that they're almost trying to wake up this person who's so deeply asleep and lost in whatever's keeping them asleep, lost in the ego, the pursuit of material things and all this other sort of finite separate stuff, that the demons almost like come to wake them up. You can also see this parallel in many alien encounters and UFO experiences, where it really is like the trigger for this person's paradigm breakdown and for them to sort of awaken out of their limited conscious worldview. It just erases their consciousness, and sometimes it comes in such a direct, almost violent way to your mind that it humbles you and you start to see reality in deeper, more interconnected ways. But the only way you were able to do that within your own direct experience was through a nightmare. I've had many nightmares, just normal nightmares, without the aid of psychedelics or hallucinogens. I literally was having nightmares last night. Absolutely, I couldn't even begin to describe how messed up my nightmares were last night. I don't want to go into them because it was very, very grisly. But instead of getting scared of them, I just tried to analyze them and see what was going on here. And I actually sort of woke up today and was like, is this the drive for me to focus on a hellish experience on the channel? Because I know that I do gravitate towards them quite a lot, even though I know the fundamentals of Vivec really is my focus on mystical, glowing, transcendental experiences of love and unity. But I just can't help myself, because I know that I have so much more to learn and I have to be humble. I'm not this enlightened person, this enlightened guru. I'm still just this thing working through shadow. And for me personally, on a journey, and I know for many of you, we are very early on. We're almost like, awakening novices, and I have to be honest with myself that I am. And for me, I do get a lot of value out of reading experiences like these, because I can't run away from them. It forces me to become conscious of them and integrate them in my own personal experience through this other person's actual, literal, direct experience of psychedelic hell. So I hope you got something out of this, and don't worry, the next one will be squeaky clean, the cleanest, one of the cleanest reports we've covered on the channel. Although you honestly don't know with Vivec, it's such an autistic whirlwind of content. You just don't know what you're gonna get. But either way, thank you for sticking with me, and I promise to God, if the Wi-Fi gets sorted on the 29th, I'll be back on the daily uploads because I love doing the daily uploads. They keep me sane. It gives me a purpose. I've been sort of losing my head a bit, having no life purpose throughout the day, because Vivec really is just my life purpose, 100%, or part of my life purpose. And I love doing it every day. I literally do it at the weekends. I'm always working on Vivec every day. That's why I can get a video out daily, because I'm obsessed with it. I actually am. It's a healthy obsession because it's a drive. It's about drive. It's about power. It's about Vivec. It's about... Oh, well, that was going somewhere, but unfortunately I'm not a wicked MC. Not in this life, anyway. Wow, what a great commentary section. No, really, it's the best they do. Anyway, hope you're doing good in whatever nodal point of consciousness you've ended up at in this infinite spectrum of experience. Look forward to the next one, and let me know if you're going through an integrative period of processing a hellish psychedelic trip, and hopefully people in the comments who've transcended that and moved on and fully processed it all can help you out on your journey, and maybe my videos can as well. But until then, sayonara and see you on the other side.